Having had over 45 enriching conversations already, I'm deeply committed to sharing in-depth insights and strategies from some of India's foremost brands. Whether we're unraveling the what, the why, and the how of user engagement, or delving into the nuances of people, product, and data, each discussion holds immense significance. Yet, in the middle of this, it's essential to pause, reacquaint ourselves with the fundamentals, and reflect on why this journey matters. So here I am with another special episode of Common Threads featuring WebEngage's Keyur, Dhami, and Apoorv Sood. This is where I bridge past conversations, drawing parallels and highlighting the most compelling bits. With Keyur and Apoorv, I've navigated the evolution of retention, explored ROI, attribution, dissected MarTech advancements, and examined how organizations adopt technologies. Welcome to episode 48 of the State of Retention Marketing podcast. I'm your host Ankur Gattani. Tune in. Let's go back to where it all began, an account as to what has happened around this subject in the last 7-8 years. We'll hear from Apoorv first.
I think a lot has happened pre and post pandemic.
Sure.
I think we started with a place where when we as WebEngage used to go and pitch our solutions to enterprise legacy businesses, the answer would be a smile and a polite no. And from there, I think we've reached a long way where I think we are partnered not only in India, but a lot of other countries with some large legacy players, a couple of them are Fortune 100 companies and Fortune 500 companies as well.
Sure.
And I think a lot, that says that a lot has changed overall.
That could be both ways, changed for WebEngage as well as for the market, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more openness, to be honest. I think a couple of things to this is that one, I think we started earlier from a place where on-prem solutions were the only way to go, and the data policies across for these large enterprise listed IPO'd companies and so on and so forth also had to entail, because the rules were as such that they could not get on cloud of sorts. So I think with the AWS's and the Google Clouds and Microsofts of the world, we've gotten to a place where I think cloud largely, first of all, is accepted as a piece of technology today. And I think majority people, if not have moved fully from on-prem solutions, are either in hybrid mode or have fully moved into a cloud-based system. So I think that was one of the biggest wins, because unless a cloud setup can exist, none of us can actually sell to enterprises, I think, which also led to evolution of data policies and acceptances and so many other things, which brings me to the fact that when we started pitching in to the big boys or the big guys, we realized that they were used to branded solutions, I'd put it as, right? Brands that were used by generations largely were multi-country and very, very large setups which created these products. And majority of these companies came from the US, right? Some of these were facts, as I would say. I think a lot has changed from there. I think it took, one is I think with a lot of fundraising and a lot of startups coming in like us, a lot of problems were not only being solved in a more user-friendly way, but also a lot of point solutions were happening, and a lot of them, or majority of them, were on cloud actually. And I think not just us, but a lot of other solutions going into some of these ecosystems helped products like us get into the cloud-based product, get into such ecosystems as well. So I think three things that come to my mind. I think the cloud acceptance, the data policy, and I think also the talent that started going in these organizations. A lot of trickle has started to happen from modern tech-oriented startups and mid-sized companies to these companies when they started to digitize, because they did not have any kind of digital talent, and that talent largely came from smaller setups. There was talent, I wouldn't say, but it took some time for at least the senior talent was there. I think the people underneath, the doers, and the users, I think, was largely taken from some of these new age companies, Amazons of the world and so many others.
Sure. So you have a Mukesh Bansal now leading Tata Digital in that sense,
100%.
right? I mean, that's as credible an example as it can get in terms of how
100%.
Traditional companies are now looking
100%.
at serious new talent.
And also another Bansal doing Navi Technologies, which is now probably
a new guy getting into an old
new
business
guy getting into old. So you see the both ways sort of interchange happening.
So maybe a good idea for us to quickly run through your journey over the last 8 years and how you've seen the world transform from the whole user engagement and retention play. Really, Keyur, over to you.
Yeah, I think I've seen small shifts, but yeah, if we just cover the entire 8-year journey that I've been with WebEngage and seen the whole retention ecosystem evolve, I compare it that where we started or where even customers were, it's a dramatic change that I see over a period of time now, where people still needed to be educated about things like even journey designer or orchestration, and they need multi-channel to how they structure teams. Things have pretty much evolved now. Now it's like a norm that they require a retention automation ecosystem per se out there. They make sure that they have teams that are pretty structured now, as opposed to someone from, say, an acquisition team or performance team actually doing retention out there, to actually having retention specialists within their team, CRM manager out there. So all of these are roles that have also evolved over a period of time. A lot more has changed, I think, not just from people, team standpoint, but even their maturity, how they think, and even the kind of talent that's now available. I'm sure there is more room to improve, but in general, making sure that there's a lot of education around things. I think it has gotten better over a period of time.
So it's taken a fair bit of time to kind of create the category, so to speak, because this whole subject of user engagement and retention, as you said, was pretty much new. People didn't even understand the why of it to begin with, maybe.
Right.
And now there seems to be at least that understanding that this is necessary and needed and all of that. Apoorv and Keyur both think that we've got a handle on the whole attention thing. But it'd be so cool to how old school businesses and new age vendors are getting into MarTech tools and making them work for them. So what has changed in terms of the kind of questions, solutions like WebEngage would be asked back then to the period in between, and now in that sense, because these guys are not new to technology, they're digital natives in that sense. Do you encounter a lot of such people now in the world and in the world that we operate in? And is the questions a lot more penetrating, hard compared to what they were before?
I think when people came, we went to people. I don't think people came to us. It'd be wrong on my part. No matter how much inbound marketing you did and how much branding that you did, I think we really made, as a tech startup, we really connected with other tech sort of companies or new age startups. But when it came to the legacy business, the real question earlier was, who are you? I think that's how pretty much there was. There was two reasons for this, I think. One, they were very happy in their own world.
Yeah.
And two, I think these were two different worlds altogether, and there was no correlation of sorts, right? Exchange of talent to this thing and so on and so forth. I think with time, apart from talent, I think the way of viewing business has also changed, right? And I think I was reading this definition somewhere. I think the real innovation basically is actually bringing the cost of technology down over a period of time, so that the technology can be used by a wider audience of sorts, right? So I think at one point in time, your CDPs and marketing automation systems were unaffordable by the larger strata of population altogether. All they could do is these small, long tail, easy to use, very, very restrictive, I wouldn't even say tools. They were like, smaller versions of tools. And that's what people would use with credit card payments to do these small pieces of sorts, right? And also what you would realize is, one of the very interesting observations that I had was, when we went to some of these large organizations, there are these large budgets, and these managers have, with various layers, some of these managers have small budgets as well, which are more credit card operated, right? So you could buy probably a $200 or a $100 tool to solve for a problem that you found critical without having to make a lot of explanation across, and you could pull that out from your budget, right? So the point was, what was happening is that a lot of these tools, whatever inefficiencies that they carried, right, as product suites and so on and so forth, from let's say user UI, or maybe triggering of certain kind of emails in a certain way, push notifications and so on and so forth, right? They were either using freemium tools to overcome those parallelly with these tools, or they were paying these cheap tools to get some of these things done, because they were not very happy with the way the others were functioning. While you're paying for this, you're paying $1 million for this huge ass product, but the reality is you're using a freemium tool to solve an edgy problem that this product can't solve.
So patchworks in some sense.
Patchworks in some way, right? But a lot of this was happening. So I think over a period of time, what has changed, I think that's where I would like to come back to, is that I think one, overall, the ecosystem of startups across the world from a technology has taken a huge up, and there's so many of them now solving so many nice, cool ass things. And people are, because some people or a lot of people have seen some success with these technology, right? Like if you paid $100 to solve a problem and I could solve the same problem in a much easier way in $20, who would not want it, right? Everybody wants to optimize for it.
Yeah.
Now that you've seen those cycles, I think openness to listen to some of these things have increased quite a lot. I think which gives us a foot in the door to talk about what we're doing. And I think it doesn't come from a space where they're judging or first trying to figure out whether what we're saying is the truth or not. They listen to us for what we bring on table. Absolutely, they'd like to do a POC, or they like to do, like to talk to our customers, like to go through an RFI or RFP process, which is a process that they do any which ways. But I think the openness is there to listen to what we have to show. And there's a belief system that, hey, you know what, small to mid-size companies with credible founders and teams can actually solve large problems at a competent cost as well. That possibility exists.
Lot more companies just think about it like that they need to invest. Probably it might also be FOMO that might be driving them, that, I can't be not having a retention tool. But considering even, the D2C ecosystem, for example, I think, now investors are also asking some of these questions. So I think they need to have a retention tool out there. So that's the kind of investment that they are also looking for. And retention definitely starts taking a play once they go for certain rounds, and above, I think. So there is that maturity that comes, and probably even a force, so to say, from the investment community, that you need to focus on retention early in their life cycle rather than picking it late. And definitely enterprises definitely see a lot more value. I think they are very much, like when they talk about them getting into any of those softwares, it's a very informed decision. It's they need to take a larger buy-in as well. To move things in enterprises is definitely difficult. But once they are bought in, then they go the full all. It won't be that they would do a half-hearted job over there. I think, the kind of governance calls that I've seen on some of the enterprise conversations are pretty mature, and they are pretty serious once they buy into an e-software. They will make sure that the entire adoption is being done correctly, having, say, platform teams at center. Sometimes they would own the whole adoption, probably until it goes to a BAU, and then hand it over to the business teams. So that's a very evolved, mature life cycle that they would see, as opposed to, the smaller companies possibly, just having certain people probably over there.
In terms of the kind of mind share allocated to the whole subject of user engagement and retention, given that the whole industry was chasing growth at all costs for a period of time, the appropriate mind share was, I don't know if it was well allocated from the kind of talent, the kind of hiring, the kind of resource allocation, to not look at this as a pure cost structure basis, but also look at it from a value delivery basis. The whole understanding and appreciation of our category in the customer's mindset at the right level of the org. What's your impression?
I think it's evolving. I mean, I spoke about D2C where it's more investor-led, I feel. Otherwise, now at least I've seen founders actually talk retention pretty early on. I think probably a mix of it, investor-led pressure versus now the whole category maturing over a period of time to, fairly established categories like travel or e-com, where this has been now a need and a norm in general. People do understand that they need to do that. To edtechs, having their own waves again, with COVID, I think we have seen different waves in different verticals as well. But everyone knows that, it's necessary. Now it's just how much they want to invest in, resources, individuals, or building teams or structures and processes around that. I think no one would say no to getting more creatives than for acquisition, but that's a very big cost structure. Sure. I think, it's all where the dollar goes the most, I think, as compared to acquisition. The dollar that they put into retention is much, much less, because, it's
that's
just
the point, right?
Right.
Well, awareness and education are making strides in understanding the importance of MarTech tools in data and cloud adoption. The issue of ROI remains a constant concern. What's all the fuss about, and how should one effectively evaluate and attribute ROI? Keyur explains.
From an ROI standpoint, I think not everyone has got it there yet. I think people just think about, if I'm putting X dollar, can I get 10X, can I get 20X, for example? And they want, in most cases at least, where, it's a couple of founders led organizations, smaller organizations, they want it very quick. I think retention is a longer cycle. I think, the whole idea of getting the buck for your money is not something that would start immediately. You will start seeing some value definitely, but you need to persist. You need to keep doing some of those experiments. It's not like, you just run a cart abandonment journey and then you'll get, your dollars out there. Definitely you may, if you are at a very poor state of retention so far. In general, you need to go beyond that. You need to keep evolving. It's a consistent effort that will pay off over a period of time. And definitely, the way we keep saying that you need to look at blended ROAS rather than just looking at what you get out of retention tool individually, how much is it paying off. I'm sure that if you start connecting the dots from acquisition to retention and then look at what the value prop is, it becomes a much more better ROI, and the way you foresee how you also put in your money in the acquisition side of things, a lot more things change accordingly.
Sure. So, I would delve into the whole maturing in a certain fashion. When you spoke about this seems to have become a category which is accepted that we need it, but still from a perspective of infra like AWS, where we must have retention stacks, but we don't necessarily see this in the revenue scheme of things. And that's where the ROI math, whether it's how you do attribution in GA versus how you do attribution in other systems, how does someone put the right value to it? Because if you're investing X money with us on the platform level, they'd expect 5X, 10X out of it. Is that the right lens to look at it? What is the right lens to look at value?
Still sticking on to features over here, but I think there are some cool things to just do. If you guys want to actually know whether there is a ROI coming out or not, there are things like universal control groups, which essentially remove certain population, does not influence them at all. Possibly if you can do it across your stack, including advertising, then you get a lot more better sense. Might be difficult, but at least at a platform level like WebEngage, you can actually introduce a universal control group, keep some 5% population aside to just test the ROI. I think you will get that ROI equation solved in the first month itself. And then you can do this exercise once again after a year's time, after 6 months possibly, to just see whether whatever baseline you had established out there is actually true still or not. Because over a period of time, things would change.
Sure.
But that would at least give you a very good sense in terms of how your ROI is being delivered, because that portion, 5% of the audience that you've kept aside, is not being sent any communications, be it retention, any of those communications per se. And you exactly know how the 95% versus 5% is behaving. That's a very quick, easy way to measure your ROI. And definitely, if you don't want to do that, then you stick to one attribution tool, because whether it's GA, whether it's WebEngage, whether it's some other tool, but the idea would be you stick to one tool to establish baselines, you change, you experiment with some of those campaigns that you're doing, and then you measure in the same tool again, how much is it giving. Because if you move across tools, the way attribution works and the way they give weightages to different things would slightly change. And then, you can't compare, your GA is giving you X revenue and, your tool out here is giving you a Y revenue, and then you keep saying to the provider or internally to your folks as well, why is it X and why is it Y? It's just the way it would work out there. But you just need to make sure how is it moving from X to X1 to X2 and Y to Y1 to Y2, and just keep that as the baseline and then keep looking at how things are moving.
So you spoke about universal control group, and as a retention marketer from before, I thought that was a fairly obvious thing. But in terms of the consumer's understanding of how this is the true way of measuring ROI, is it super obvious yet, or do you still think there's a certain learning curve involved there?
No, there's definitely learning curve. I think there are more. It's not just universal control group. We have more such things internally out there. There are control groups. There are custom control groups. So I'm sure that there are variations. I think just a few weeks back, I think we met a customer in Bangalore. I think me, Ankit, we were in one of the conversations. That customer was pretty mature. Actually, they exactly knew that they don't want to do universal control groups per se, because then you leave that audience out forever. That's very criminal in terms of you almost losing that customer base, and that also would possibly impact the kind of, there would be some kind of prejudice that would come in over a period of time, I think, if you keep that set of consumers away. So I think the solution given was using custom control groups, which are more periodic. You keep it like once in 15 days, 15 days, you keep changing your control groups, possibly, or once a month, so that you at least know that how your control groups are behaving versus the target group, and then you change it once again after a period of time, and then again measure that.
Fair. So in that sense, now if this is the approach to be taken, where the entire onus of squeezing value out of a platform ends up being actually on the team because a tool is a tool and their advice is an advice, but ultimately the execution still remains in the hands of the customers and his teams, right?
I wouldn't say yes to that completely. I think, as providers, we are equally have our skin in the game, I think. And that's where teams like customer success come into picture. Not just customer success, the broader umbrella of, success orgs that come into picture. And our game would be education in some form, like what we have seen as best practices across the board is what we need to bring out over there. We are responsible in some form to make sure that they derive ROI, and more importantly, they keep experimenting something new that we have seen in the industry. I'm sure that be it any, say, let's just take travel and where it started from a search abandonment to actually upsell, cross-sell, some of the other things. We have seen this whole cycle with multiple players and or even in edtech or fintech. So we have those experts that are sitting out there and who have been seeing this industry evolve over a period of time. Like while I might have spent 8 years, I'm sure that some of the folks in our teams have spent enough years as well, and that's a collective wisdom that we own over a period of time. And that's where we play a good, important role to at least tell them what they can do, what they need to do, where they are at the maturity level, and where they need to evolve eventually. Now it's up to them on how quickly they want to go out over there and achieve those goals. That's where a lot of planning, execution that comes into picture. And I can always give 10 different things to a customer, but I need to at least see out of those 10, are they even picking 5 things in a quarter? If that's not happening, then you can't keep asking me another 10 things every time that I meet you, because you have not even implemented the 5 that I've given you the last time.
I couldn't agree more with Keyur about the significance of unlocking retention success through collaborative responsibility. Another critical aspect shaping the outcome of this puzzle is how leaders and stakeholders approach it. Apoorv highlights the differences in outlooks of CIOs, CDOs, CDOs, and CMOs. There's CMO today, and there is a CDO today, and there is a CIO today, and there is a CTO today as well. These are different stakeholders of the same puzzle.
Correct.
They're all charged with leading the organization forward, and they tend to have their own viewpoints and their own needs and their own expectations, their own anchor points on where they look at that lens from, right? What's the most critical difference you've observed in their outlooks in that sense?
So I think, let me say this, that I think only in a very large organizations do I see these, the digital problem or the omnichannel problem being divided between CIO, CDO, CMO and and CSO and so many other. COO can also play a role depending on what the problem is. I don't think in an average organization, even in the large legacy world, these many people sit at one problem. As I said, everybody's trying to now optimize. You've seen the amount of firings that have happened in the last couple of months and the amount of people who are laid off, and suddenly there are people who worked in an large org for 10 years and suddenly not a part of those org, right? And they've been some of them have been great performers as well, but it's not about them. Sometimes it's about the fact that do we actually need that amount of people to solve for the same problem? So I think everybody's optimizing, and I've heard Tata running a very large sized company to now Tata actually running some of these functions in a very different way, which is very not Tata-like from that standpoint, right? In India and so on and so forth. So coming back to this is, I think, one, not every organization has this sort of a skill set always available to solve these problems. One. Two, there are absolutely some very, very large organizations. And again, as you rightly said, right, it also depends on who's at what stage of the problem, and also how fast do we need to solve the problem. If we started late, we're already behind. We might be the top organization. Now I have to throw more people and more budgets and products at solving the same problem, right? So one other parameter is this. But having said so, in case there were these many people who existed, I think a CMO today is still looking at larger marketing P&L. For him or her, I think it's still more customer centric as compared to, is the customer online, can I push my customer online versus offline, and so many other things of sorts. Yeah, absolutely. If I can solve an experience and make it frictionless and bring a service to a customer at home, because it solves for a lot of cost and experience and some of the other issues, I will be on my priority. But I'm not trying to ship my offline customer to online, preferably of sorts, if that's how I see it. A CDO largely is with a digital mandate, right? His mandate is to digitize. He's there on your P&L to say that whatever from a company efficiency, from a cost efficiency, from an experience efficiency, from a time efficiency or whatever needs to be digitized should be digitized, whether it be from a customer experience or an internal experience standpoint. That's how I see a CDO as. I think CIO largely looks at the information and data aspect of things, and sometimes is coupled with security aspect of things. And some CIOs also work with CFOs on cost aspect of things. So I think sometimes CIO is that guy who's supposed to be the guy who knows it all from a data security, data separately, data sciences and stuff, security, and the modern trends of automation and modernization and so on. So that's how I see the CIO, but again, can be used in different ways. And the last guy I think is the CTO. I think is a very key sort of member apart from CISO and other guys. CTO, I think for CTO, it's largely about maintaining the current tech stack. The stack that is, on whatever we've been talking ultimately is tech, and someone has to build, scale, modernize, and optimize it. I think CTO largely is trying to look at two things. I think one is the cost at which he's operating his stack, whether it be people and all the technologies associated, and obviously some bit of security around it. The efficiency of the stack, the error, the issue, the upgradation, and so on and so forth, and optimizing from that standpoint. And obviously, all of this links into the business goals somewhere or the other. But I think he's looking at it from that angle. So sometimes what happens is having too many people, there's a lot of conflict as well, which is what slows it down as well, right?
Which is what I sort of zoom into that. Somebody is going to need to be very aggressively pushing this charter down the road, because otherwise it'll just get stuck in internal tussles in some sense, right? Because people have different priorities, and it's not like they have a vested interest in keeping the status quo, but they also have different priorities on how they look at that evolution of technology stacks, right? And hence, I was going to zoom into the part where is a CDO typically leading the charter on all of this digital transformation. And let's zoom into the whole consumer business side of things, where there is going to be likely a digital interface with the customer. It could be a transactional interface, an e-commerce platform. Could just be an engagement interface, like where there's a lot of content and a lot of discovery happening, but the transactions still happen in an offline fashion. So in that kind of ecosystem where you have all sorts of consumer goods companies, you have all sorts of fashion companies, you have all sorts of apparel companies or footwear companies, and all of these guys having a web presence, both on marketplaces as well as on their digital platforms. And they are now trying to get aggressive with that side of things as well. So either they will be bringing in new people to run these charters, or they will be reskilling some of the existing people to run these charters. And some of them are successful, some of them not so much. Some of them have actually been giant blunders as well, right? So in your assessment of what's the playbook been, which has been, a definitive, let's say, set of things that you must do while trying to drive this charter, what were those, key bullet points, at a people level, corporate strategy level, technology choices level?
So I think I am a huge believer of OKRs, and I think OKRs and project management tools do wonders in complicated structures, and I know people who don't believe in them, but I do broadly kind of believe in such structures. Having said so, I think in a complicated org where there are multiple heavyweight stakeholders and bringing their own perspectives, yes, you're right that if not aligned, a lot of this could lead into conflict, and some of their 2-3 years of, an average 2-3 year large executive experience or a tenure could lead to end outcome being nothing. So you pumped in all the money and all the great minds together, but if they can't function together, the end result is going to be zero, right? Let's take an assumption for the org, which is a retail org or whatever you're talking about, without naming any company, assuming that they're legacy in nature and they're enterprise in nature, which means they are upgrading their legacy offline ecosystems and getting into an omni-channel mode and building their digital ecosystems. I think CDO and CTO become one of the major people, because most offline or most legacy organizations are moving from moving towards offline upgradation of their technology of the offline business and building their online pieces. And in that piece, I think, and then connecting these from a unified view standpoint, right? So I think you've hired a CDO because he understands the digital world better. So I think that he or she becomes one of the main key stakeholder. And then we have the CTO because you need someone to build a stack for you, and it is technology and not only build but scale, upgrade, maintain, and so on and so forth, right? So I think these two people become, I think, one of the most important pieces. Now in terms of handling the project of this digitization and modernization or whatever you'd like to call this, I think CDO should be the ideal owner of the project, because I think sometimes CDO is the CMO and CMO is the CDO. And I'm going to make a controversial statement here again, that sometimes I think CDOs are sometimes hired when CMOs are not as digitally aware and inclined, and that inefficiency is solved by a CDO. Ideally, in an ideal case scenario, the CMO should be able to do both ways of sorts.
Let's delve into the pivotal role of talent supply in spearheading digital transformation. How are these individuals embracing broader responsibilities and what hurdles do they face? Keyur explains this.
It's important to get your guy right and give him the powers. I think that's very important, as an organization. So even, for example, some of the names that you mentioned, while they are going through their digital transformation journey, they have put a person probably from a new economy, or they might have even cherry-picked some people from the existing roles. But they have been given that power, authority to make that change. They have been asked to pick their own teams, the right teams that they want to make that change happen in the organization as well. And then comes the processes and everything else, I think. So once you have the right people, then you figure out what the change management would be, and that's the hardest part. Definitely there would be resistance to change because that's a new way of thinking. People would always say that this is already working, why are you even disrupting this whole cycle? So one of the large fintech players, probably in the lending space, I remember their journey, and it was very clear mandate that they had, that they need to increase something called as a self-serve rate. Now self-serve rate is largely how people avail loans, and they need to go without going through the call center. Now, that's a problem statement that was put across to us as a company. Now, imagine while I can do communications, but it was not just going until the communication layer, but I had to actually analyze how their call center works as well. Go beyond the digital means, figure out how, the phone conversations are happening with the customers, look at data points on how the whole, different milestones, how they go through those. When is that the call center starts, picking up and making calls, and figure out in that time window what best we can do to improve self-serve rate. And this was not just an exercise on the communication side that we did. We had product managers sitting alongside with us. They are actually, looking at the data points. They are looking at not just the averages that are happening within the funnels, but they are looking at percentile data. They are looking at how is my 50th percentile looking, how is my 75th percentile, and how is my 90th percentile looking like in the same funnel. And then I'm optimizing some of my product flows, probably bring in, automated ways to do KYC. Just instead of a PAN number, I might go beyond that, GST and some other things in case there are business loans, and making sure that if those are the points where there is clogging that's happening, because of which my call center starts calling, I'll better the product as well, experience as well. So this is a very unique way of looking at this problem statement. You look at a problem statement, you don't look at that it's a retention problem. It's an organizational problem.
Which is exactly what I was heading into, that the moment you start affecting metrics in that fashion, that your self-serve rate is increased in a certain fashion, the number of calls coming in is reduced in a certain fashion, and there are so many other things that you could be affecting as a part of the solutioning process. I wonder how the ROI math would suddenly look like, 500x or something.
Yeah, definitely. I think we probably doubled our billables in a matter of 3-4 months.
Because they were happy with the outcomes,
they were okay. They were perfectly okay. And that's where, you look at business outcomes and you tend to deliver those. And then you align people for those business outcomes. It's whether it's marketing, product, tech, whoever it's a business outcome. And many times I don't see people introspecting what they have done and not done. I think, it's very easy to blame that the customer success guy did not give me 5 more ideas. But it's very equally important to make sure that the customer success guy knows your business outcome. How can I change the business outcome if I don't even know that this is something that you are caring about? So it's a lot more discovery and a journey that we have to take together to first know what are the KPIs that are important, and then trusting us to deliver on those KPIs as well. I think, we have done a fair, again, this is always that 80-20 principle that I would see. There are these 20% customers who have been demanding, but, those are the demands that we love to meet as well, because at least there is clarity out there that they know that what they want. Not having that clarity is criminal in the first place.
Hope this episode of Common Threads shed light on the basics of retention. Whether you're stuck with ROI, talent acquisition, or driving change, let us guide you through it. Don't forget to like, follow, share, and subscribe to the State of Retention Marketing podcast. This is your host Ankur, signing off.